The sun was beginning to set over the small town of Ridgeville, casting a warm orange glow across the sky. This town, nestled between rolling hills and wide open fields, was a quiet place, a town where everyone knew each other, or at least they thought they did. Charlie Henderson stood at the door of his restaurant, wiping his hands on a towel. The proud oak was his pride and joy, passed down to him by his father. It wasn't much, just a diner on the corner of Main Street, but to Charlie it was everything. He'd spent years keeping the place afloat, serving the regulars and the tourists who wandered in, making sure that his father's legacy stayed alive. Charlie was a man set in his ways. He believed in hard work, loyalty, and tradition. But there was one thing he was known for, though people didn't often say it out loud. Charlie Henderson had a problem with people who didn't look like him. The town was predominantly white, and Charlie liked it that way. Every now and then, someone new would come through, but he had a way of making them feel unwelcome. He wasn't overt, but his cold stares, dismissive attitude, and occasional jokes made his stance clear. As Charlie looked out the window, he saw a car pull up in front of the restaurant. It was a sleek black vehicle, much nicer than most of the cars that rolled into Ridgeville. The doors opened, and out stepped a couple, well-dressed, sophisticated. They didn't look like the usual clientele. Charlie's eyes narrowed as they approached. They were black, and for reasons that Charlie himself might not have fully understood, something about that rubbed him the wrong way. He folded his arms across his chest and waited for them to come in. The couple walked through the door, the bell chiming as it swung open. The man was tall, with broad shoulders, wearing a tailored suit. The woman was equally striking, her long hair cascading over her shoulders, her smile warm but reserved. They walked with an air of confidence, the kind that Charlie wasn't used to seeing in his small-town diner. "Good evening," the man said, his voice deep and polite. "Table for two, please." Charlie didn't respond right away. He sized them up, looking them over as if they didn't belong. After a long, uncomfortable pause, he finally spoke. "We're full tonight," Charlie said, not even bothering to check the seating chart. The man raised an eyebrow and glanced around the half-empty diner. There were more than enough seats available, and it was clear that the restaurant wasn't even close to being full. "Are you sure?" the woman asked, her voice calm but questioning. Charlie tightened his grip on the towel in his hand. "Yeah, I'm sure," he said, his tone sharp. "We don't have space for you." The man and woman exchanged a glance, a flicker of disbelief crossing their faces. It wasn't the first time they'd experienced something like this, but it never got easier. "All right," the man said, his voice steady. "We'll take our business elsewhere." They turned to leave, but just as they were about to step out the door, the woman stopped and looked back at Charlie. Her eyes were piercing, filled with a quiet strength that made Charlie shift uncomfortably on his feet. "You know," she said, her voice soft but firm, "we're not here by accident. We've heard a lot about this town and your restaurant. We wanted to see for ourselves what kind of place it was." Charlie snorted. "Yeah, well, now you know." The woman smiled, but it wasn't a kind smile. It was the kind of smile that held a deeper meaning, one that Charlie didn't quite understand. "Oh, we know more than you think," she said cryptically. Then, without another word, they left. Charlie watched them go, feeling a strange sense of unease settle in his chest. Something about the way they carried themselves, the way they spoke, made him feel like he'd made a mistake. But he pushed the thought away. He wasn't about to let some strangers come in and disrupt his routine. Over the next few days, Charlie noticed something unusual. The diner was quieter than usual. The regulars still came in, but there were fewer tourists, fewer new faces. It wasn't enough to raise alarm bells, but it was noticeable. Then, about a week after the incident, something even stranger happened. A group of men in suits came into the diner, carrying briefcases and looking official. They asked to speak with Charlie, and when he stepped out from behind the counter, they handed him an envelope. Charlie frowned as he opened it, his eyes scanning the letter inside. His heart skipped a beat as he read the words. It was a legal notice, a lawsuit. The couple he had thrown out were not just any random customers. They were prominent civil rights attorneys, and they were suing him for racial discrimination. Charlie's face turned pale as he realized the gravity of the situation. This wasn't just some small-town dispute that would blow over in a few days. This was serious. His business, his livelihood, everything he had worked for was on the line. As the reality of the situation set in, Charlie felt a knot form in his stomach. He had made a mistake, a big one. And now he was going to have to face the consequences. The lawsuit quickly became the talk of the town. Word spread like wildfire, and soon everyone knew what had happened. Some of the townspeople supported Charlie, claiming that he had the right to run his business however he saw fit. But others were not so sure. They began to question whether Charlie's actions were really justified or if they were rooted in something far more sinister. As the trial date approached, Charlie found himself overwhelmed with anxiety. He had never been in a courtroom before, never been involved in anything like this. The couple, however, seemed unfazed. They were professionals, after all. They knew exactly what they were doing. The day of the trial came, and the courtroom was packed. People from all over the town and even from neighboring cities had come to watch. It was a spectacle, a clash of values that had been simmering beneath the surface for years. Charlie sat at the defendant's table, his lawyer beside him, while the couple sat across the room, calm and composed. The judge, a stern-looking woman with sharp eyes, presided over the case. The evidence was damning. Witnesses testified about how Charlie had treated the couple, how he had refused to serve them even though the restaurant was nearly empty. It was clear to everyone in the room that this wasn't just a case of bad customer service. It was a case of racial discrimination. As the trial went on, Charlie felt a growing sense of dread. He knew, deep down, that he was going to lose. And when the judge finally delivered the verdict, his worst fears were confirmed. Guilty. Charlie's heart sank as the judge listed the penalties. He would have to pay a hefty fine, and his restaurant would be put under scrutiny for any future violations. But the worst part wasn't the money or the legal trouble. The worst part was the damage to his reputation. The Proud Oak was no longer the beloved diner it once was. People stopped coming. The regulars, the tourists, everyone seemed to vanish overnight. Charlie's business, his legacy, was crumbling before his eyes. In the weeks that followed, Charlie tried to keep the diner afloat, but it was no use. The lawsuit had tarnished his name, and no amount of hard work could undo the damage. He was left with nothing but an empty restaurant and a broken heart. One evening, as Charlie sat alone in the darkened diner, the couple returned. This time, they weren't here to eat. They were here to talk. The man stood at the door, his hands in his pockets, while the woman stepped forward, her eyes filled with a mix of sympathy and resolve. "We didn't want it to come to this," she said softly. "But you left us no choice." Charlie looked up at them, his face lined with exhaustion and regret. "I know," he muttered, his voice hoarse. "I messed up." The man nodded. "We didn't do this to ruin you. We did this because what you did was wrong. You can't treat people like that." Charlie sighed, running a hand through his thinning hair. "I didn't mean for it to get this bad." The woman smiled sadly. "It's never too late to change, Charlie. But you have to want to." For the first time, Charlie felt a glimmer of something he hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Maybe, just maybe, he could turn things around. But it would take more than just an apology. It would take a complete transformation, a willingness to confront the beliefs he had held on to for so long. As the couple left the diner, Charlie sat in the empty room, thinking about what they had said. He knew it wouldn't be easy, but if he wanted to save what was left of his life, he had to start somewhere. And so, with a heavy heart and a new sense of purpose, Charlie Henderson began the long, difficult journey toward redemption. Subscribe American Fables for more.